I found out my wife was cheating on me with her boss, so I decided to hide that my small business was on the rise. When I confronted her, she shouted, "You're a coward! Learn how to make money." The moment she walked into the CEO's office, she had a surprise. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." My name is Fred, and at 56 years old, I thought I knew my wife. 23 years of marriage teaches you things about a person, or so I believed. Allison had always been ambitious, always reaching for something just beyond her grasp. I admired that about her once. Now, standing in our kitchen on that gray Tuesday morning in March, staring at her phone screen, I realized how naive I'd been. The text message was right there, bold and shameless. "Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful. Same hotel as last week?" It was from Russell, her boss at the marketing firm where she'd worked for the past 8 years. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering against the tile floor in a sound that seemed to echo through 23 years of what I thought was a solid marriage. I bent down to clean up the ceramic pieces, my hands shaking slightly. The cuts from the broken mug felt appropriate somehow, matching the way my chest felt torn open. I'd suspected something for weeks. Allison had been working late more often, her phone constantly buzzing with messages she'd quickly hide. She'd started dressing differently too, wearing perfumes I'd never smelled before, taking extra care with her appearance on days when she supposedly had important meetings. But suspecting and knowing are two different kinds of pain entirely. When Allison came downstairs 20 minutes later, perfectly dressed in a navy blazer and pencil skirt, I was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in my hands. She froze in the doorway, her face cycling through surprise, guilt, and then something I'd never seen before, defiance. "How long?" I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. She didn't deny it. Maybe that hurt most of all. 3 months, she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Since the Christmas party." I remembered that party. I'd stayed home with a headache while she went alone. Russell had been there, of course. Tall, confident Russell with his expensive suits and his corner office. I'd met him a few times at company events, always felt his handshake lingered a bit too long, his smile a bit too practiced. "Why?" The word came out broken, barely a whisper. Allison's expression hardened. She walked to the coffee maker, pouring herself a cup as if this was just another Tuesday morning conversation. "Because I'm tired, Fred. I'm tired of pretending this is enough." She gestured around our modest kitchen, our home that we'd bought 15 years ago when times were better. "This?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Our marriage is this to you?" She turned around, and the look in her eyes was like ice water. "Look at yourself, Fred. Really look. When's the last time you took me somewhere nice? When's the last time you surprised me with anything that didn't come from the discount rack?" The words hit like physical blows. I thought about our last anniversary dinner at the chain restaurant downtown, how I'd saved for weeks to afford even that. I thought about the second-hand earrings I'd bought her for her birthday, how her smile had seemed forced when she opened the box. "Russell understands what I need," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "He knows how to treat a woman. He makes real money, Fred. He drives a car that's less than 10 years old. He takes me to restaurants where you need reservations." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "So this is about money?" "Everything is about money." Her voice cracked like a whip. "You think love pays the bills? You think romance fixes the leak in the bathroom ceiling that's been dripping for 6 months? I'm 48 years old, Fred. I don't have time to wait for you to figure out how to be successful." I opened my mouth to tell her then. To explain that my small consulting business, the one she'd always dismissed as Fred's little hobby, had been growing steadily for the past 18 months. That the project I'd been working on quietly in the basement office had attracted 3 major clients in the last 6 weeks alone. That the contracts I'd signed just last month would bring in more money than Russell made in half a year. But something in her expression stopped me. The contempt, the absolute certainty that she had all the answers. She'd already made her choice, already decided I wasn't worth waiting for. "Russell is picking me up for lunch today," she said, checking her watch. "We're going to talk about our future." "Your future?" The words tasted bitter. "My future," she corrected. "I've wasted enough time on yours." She grabbed her purse from the counter, then paused at the doorway. "I'll be staying at Russell's place tonight. Maybe it's time we both stopped pretending this marriage means anything anymore." The front door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in our kitchen with the broken pieces of my coffee mug still scattered on the floor. I knelt down again, carefully picking up each shard, thinking about how some breaks can't be fixed no matter how carefully you try to put the pieces back together. But as I threw the last piece into the trash, I felt something unexpected settling into my chest. Not just hurt, not just anger, but something sharper. Something that felt almost like relief. Because for the first time in months, Allison had been completely honest with me. She'd shown me exactly who she was, exactly what mattered to her. And now I knew exactly what I needed to do. I walked down to my basement office, past the awards on the wall that Allison had stopped noticing years ago, past the contracts that would change everything. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, looking at the bank account she didn't know existed, the one where my business income had been quietly accumulating. If she wanted to see what real money looked like, I'd give her that chance. But not the way she expected. 3 days passed without a word from Allison. No calls, no texts, nothing. She'd packed a suitcase while I was at the grocery store and left like we were roommates instead of spouses who'd shared more than 2 decades together. The silence in our house felt strange at first, then oddly peaceful. I spent those 3 days doing something I hadn't done in years, focusing entirely on myself and my work. Without the constant undercurrent of Allison's dissatisfaction, without her sighs and eye rolls every time I mentioned a client call or worked late, I felt like I could breathe again. My consulting business specialized in operational efficiency for mid-sized companies, the kind of work that sounds boring at cocktail parties but saves businesses hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'd started it 5 years ago as a side project, something to do with the expertise I'd gained during my 25 years in corporate management before taking early retirement. Allison had called it cute at first, then Fred's little project, as it became clear I was serious about it. What she didn't know was that my little project had grown into something substantial, very substantial. On Thursday morning, I was reviewing proposals when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Russell's company name. My heart rate spiked for a moment before I realized it wasn't personal. This was business. Fred Morrison. The voice was crisp, professional. Speaking. This is Jessica Chen from Henderson Marketing Solutions. We got your name from Margaret Willis at Consolidated Freight. She said you helped them streamline their logistics operations last year. I smiled, remembering Margaret. Tough woman, brilliant mind, and she'd seen results within 2 months of implementing my recommendations. That's correct. How can I help you? We're facing some significant operational challenges, and Margaret spoke very highly of your work. Would you be available for a consultation? We're prepared to move quickly on this. Henderson Marketing Solutions. Russell's company. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. I'd be happy to discuss it. When would be convenient? Would tomorrow afternoon work? Say, 2 o'clock? Our CEO, Russell Henderson, would like to meet with you personally. I felt a surge of something dark and satisfying. Tomorrow at 2 works perfectly. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair and considered the situation. Russell wanted to hire me to fix his company's problems while sleeping with my wife. The same wife who'd told me I was a failure, that I couldn't make real money, that Russell was everything I wasn't. I opened my laptop and did what I should have done months ago. I researched Russell Henderson thoroughly. What I found was fascinating. Henderson Marketing had been struggling for the past 18 months. Revenue was down 22%. They'd lost 3 major clients, and their operational costs were spiraling out of control. Russell's LinkedIn profile and company website painted a picture of success, but the public financial records told a different story. He was drowning, and he needed help. My help. The next morning, I chose my clothes carefully. Not my best suit, that would come later, but something professional enough to command respect without appearing threatening. I wanted Russell to underestimate me at first, the same way everyone always had. Henderson Marketing's offices were in a gleaming downtown building, all glass and chrome and expensive furniture in the lobby. I announced myself to the receptionist, a young woman who looked harried and stressed. Mr. Morrison, Mr. Henderson is running a few minutes late. Can I get you coffee? Water? Coffee would be great, thank you. While I waited, I observed, the office had the kind of surface polish that impressed clients but masked deeper problems. Expensive artwork on the walls, but I noticed the carpet was worn near the reception desk. Beautiful leather furniture, but some of the chairs had been positioned to hide scuff marks. It reminded me of Allison, actually. All flash and presentation, but when you looked closely, the foundation was cracking. Fred Morrison. I turned to see Russell Henderson approaching, and I had to admit, I understood part of Allison's attraction. He was tall, confident, with the kind of polished appearance that came from expensive grooming and well-tailored clothes. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. Russell Henderson, thank you for coming on such short notice. My pleasure. Margaret Willis speaks very highly of your company. His smile flickered slightly. Margaret's been a good friend to us. Please, come up to my office. Russell's office was on the 20th floor with a view of the city that probably cost more in monthly rent than most people made in a year. The desk was massive, mahogany, positioned to intimidate. Behind it hung his diplomas, awards, and photos of him with various business leaders and politicians. Impressive view, I said, looking out the window. Location matters in this business, Russell replied, settling behind his desk. Image is everything. I nodded, thinking about how image had certainly mattered to my wife. So, what kind of operational challenges are you facing? For the next hour, Russell laid out his company's problems with the kind of desperation he tried to hide behind corporate jargon. Cash flow issues disguised as liquidity optimization opportunities. Staff turnover presented as human capital restructuring needs. Client losses framed as market segment realignment requirements. I took notes, asked the right questions, and watched him carefully. This was a man in trouble, projecting success while his business crumbled around him. No wonder he was attracted to the expensive restaurants and luxury lifestyle. He was probably leveraging everything to maintain appearances. The consulting fee for a project this scope would be $75,000, I said when he finished. Paid in 3 installments, first payment due upon signing the contract. Russell's eyes widened slightly. It was more than he'd expected, I could tell. But Margaret Willis had recommended me, and desperate men pay premium prices. That seems reasonable, he said carefully. How soon could you start? I could begin the assessment phase Monday, provided we can finalize the paperwork today. Excellent. Russell stood up, extending his hand again. I have to say, Fred, Margaret really undersold your credentials. I expected someone more academic. You clearly understand the real world of business. I shook his hand, thinking about Allison's words from Tuesday morning. About how Russell understood what she needed, how he made real money, how he knew how to treat a woman. I believe in results, I said simply. As I left Henderson Marketing, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of being exactly where I needed to be at exactly the right moment. Russell Henderson needed me to save his failing business. Allison had chosen him over me because of his supposed success and wealth, but neither of them knew that Russell's success was an illusion, and my supposed failure was about to become their reality. I drove home through the early afternoon traffic, already planning my next moves. This wasn't about revenge exactly. It was about truth. About showing people exactly who they really were when the masks came off. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison, the first contact since Tuesday. Need to pick up some things from the house. Will Russell's business relationship with you be a problem? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, what business relationship? Her response came quickly. Don't play dumb, Fred. Russell told me he's hiring some consultant named Morrison. That's not you, is it? I smiled as I typed my reply. See you when you get here. 23 years of marriage, and she still didn't even know my business name. Allison arrived at our house that evening with the kind of nervous energy I'd seen her display before important presentations. She kept checking her phone, touching her hair, adjusting her jewelry. Russell's influence was written all over her. New earrings that caught the light, a handbag I'd never seen before, subtle but expensive makeup that made her look younger. You look different, I said, watching her from the kitchen doorway as she stood uncertainly in our living room. She lifted her chin slightly. I look happy, Fred. Maybe you just forgot what that looked like. The barb was aimed to hurt, but it bounced off me. I'd spent the last week discovering something about myself. Without her constant criticism, without her disappointed sighs every time I mentioned work, I felt lighter. More like the man I used to be before 23 years of trying to meet impossible expectations. So, I said, settling into my old armchair, Russell Henderson. Her face went through several expressions, surprise, defensiveness, then something that looked almost like pride. He told you? He hired me, Allison. Professional consultation for Henderson Marketing. She blinked, clearly confused. Hired you for what? Operational efficiency consulting. It's what I do. What I've been doing for the past 5 years while you called it my little hobby. But, she sat down on the edge of the sofa, her designer handbag clutched in her lap. That's impossible. Russell would have mentioned if he was hiring you specifically. He doesn't know who I am, Allison. My business operates under Morrison Strategic Solutions. He hired Fred Morrison, the consultant. He has no idea Fred Morrison is married to his girlfriend. I watched her process this information, saw the moment when the implications started to sink in. What kind of consulting? The kind that companies need when they're failing, I said simply. Her face went pale. Failing? Russell's company isn't failing. He just got promoted to CEO last year. He makes 6 figures. He drives a BMW. Russell's company is hemorrhaging money. They've lost 3 major clients in 18 months. Their operational costs are out of control. Cash flow is a disaster. I leaned forward slightly. The BMW is probably leased, and based on what I saw in their offices, they're spending more on image than they can afford. You're lying. But her voice lacked conviction. Ask him about their quarterly reports. Ask him why he needed to hire an outside consultant on such short notice. Ask him why he's willing to pay $75,000 for help if everything is going so well. Allison's hands were shaking slightly as she set her purse down. $75,000? For what? To save his business. To fix the problems that are about to cost him everything. I studied her face carefully. The same business success that made him so attractive to you. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. This doesn't change anything, Fred. Even if Russell's having some temporary difficulties, at least he's ambitious. At least he's trying to build something. Unlike me. You've been hiding in that basement for 5 years, playing with spreadsheets and calling it a business. Russell runs a real company with real employees and real responsibilities. I could have told her then. Could have explained that my spreadsheet games had generated more profit in the last 6 months than her salary brought in all year. Could have mentioned the 3 major contracts I'd signed just last week, or the company in Chicago that wanted to fly me out for a consultation next month. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. You should probably call Russell, I said. Let him know that his new consultant is your husband. Why would I do that? Because honesty might be a good place to start, unless you're planning to keep lying to both of us indefinitely. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Uncertainty. For 23 years, Allison had been absolutely sure of herself, sure of what she wanted, sure that I wasn't providing it. Now, suddenly, the ground was shifting under her feet. He doesn't need to know, she said finally. This is just business. You do whatever consulting work he needs, take your fee, and we all move on with our lives. Our separate lives, you mean? Yes. Her voice was firmer now, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Russell and I are serious about this, Fred. We're not just having an affair. We're planning a future together. A future based on his success. A future based on compatibility, on shared values, on wanting the same things out of life. I nodded slowly. And what happens to that future if Russell's business fails? It won't fail. Russell is too smart, too connected. He'll figure it out. With my help. She paused, clearly not having considered this angle. With whatever help he needs. So you're okay with your future husband paying your current husband $75,000 to save the business that's funding your new lifestyle? The color drained from her face again. When you put it like that, it sounds complicated? Temporary, she said firmly. Russell's situation is temporary. Everyone has setbacks in business. The strong ones recover. I stood up, moving to the window beside her. Outside, our neighbor was mowing his lawn, the sound of suburban normalcy drifting through the glass. You know what I learned this week, Allison? Without you constantly telling me what I was doing wrong, I remembered what I was doing right. Meaning maybe the problem wasn't my lack of ambition. Maybe the problem was that you never bothered to find out what my ambitions actually were. She turned to face me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married 23 years ago. Vulnerable, uncertain, reaching for something she couldn't quite name. It's too late for that, Fred. We're too far down this road to turn back. You're right, I said. We are. She gathered her purse and headed toward the stairs. I'm just going to get some clothes. I'll be out of your way in 20 minutes. I watched her climb the stairs to what used to be our bedroom, listened to her moving around up there, opening drawers and closets. When she came back down with a suitcase, she paused at the front door. "For what it's worth," she said without looking at me, "I never meant for it to happen this way." "Yes, you did," I replied quietly. "You just never thought you'd get caught." After she left, I went down to my basement office and opened the folder containing Russell's contract. Tomorrow, I would start the most interesting consulting project of my career. I would have unlimited access to Henderson Marketing's financial records, operational procedures, and strategic planning documents. I would learn exactly how desperate Russell Henderson really was, and more importantly, I would learn exactly what Allison's future was really worth. But tonight, I had phone calls to make. My 3 newest clients were expecting progress reports, and the Chicago company wanted to schedule that consultation. My real business, the one Allison had never bothered to understand, was growing faster than I'd ever imagined possible. It was ironic, really. For 5 years, she'd been waiting for me to become successful. She just never noticed when it actually happened. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything seem possible. I dressed carefully for my first official day at Henderson Marketing. Not too expensive, but professional enough to command respect. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was preparing to save the business of the man who was sleeping with my wife. Russell greeted me in the lobby with the enthusiasm of a drowning man who'd just spotted a life preserver. "Fred, ready to dig into the chaos?" "That's what you're paying me for," I replied, shaking his hand. He led me through the office, introducing me to key staff members. I noticed things he probably hoped I wouldn't. The way employees avoided eye contact with him, the tension in their shoulders, the hurried whispers that stopped when we approached. This wasn't just a company with operational problems. This was a workplace where people were afraid for their jobs. "We've set up a temporary office for you here," Russell said, opening the door to a small conference room. "You'll have access to all our financial systems, operational reports, everything you need." "I appreciate the transparency," I said, settling into the chair. "Most companies are more protective of their data." Russell's laugh was strained. "We're past the point of being protective. We need solutions, fast." Over the next 4 hours, I immersed myself in Henderson Marketing's records, and what I found was worse than I'd expected. The company wasn't just struggling, it was in free fall. Revenue had dropped 38% in the last 18 months. They were carrying debt that exceeded their assets. 3 major clients had left, citing poor service and missed deadlines. But the most interesting discovery was personal. Russell's salary was impressive on paper, $140,000 annually, but he wasn't actually receiving it. The company owed him 4 months of back pay. His BMW wasn't leased. It was financed at a crushing interest rate because his credit had been damaged by personal guarantees on company loans. The expensive restaurants, the luxury lifestyle, the image of success that had attracted Allison. It was all built on borrowed money and borrowed time. Around noon, Russell knocked on my office door. "How's it looking?" I gestured to the chair across from my temporary desk. "We need to talk." His face went pale, but he sat down. "That bad?" "Russell, I'm going to be direct with you because sugarcoating this won't help anyone. Your company is approximately 6 weeks away from bankruptcy." The color drained completely from his face. 6 weeks? Your current cash flow can't sustain operations past the end of next month. You're carrying debt that's strangling your ability to function. Your operational costs are running at 137% of revenue. Russell slumped in his chair. "But we're bringing in new clients. I just closed a deal with Peterson Industries last week for $12,000 over 6 months. Your monthly overhead is $43,000. One small contract isn't going to fix this." He put his head in his hands. "Jesus, I knew things were tight, but I thought we were turning the corner. You've been managing crisis to crisis instead of addressing the fundamental problems. The good news is that most of these issues are fixable, but it's going to require dramatic changes." "What kind of changes?" I opened my laptop and pulled up the preliminary analysis I'd been working on. "First, you need to cut operational costs by at least 40%. That means downsizing staff, moving to a smaller office, eliminating non-essential services. Downsize? But we just hired 3 new people who you can't afford to pay. Russell, you haven't drawn your full salary in 4 months. How are you paying your personal expenses?" His silence told me everything I needed to know. Credit cards, personal loans, maybe family money. The lifestyle he was projecting was as much of an illusion as his company's success. Second, I continued, you need to completely restructure your service offerings. Focus on what you do well and eliminate everything else. Third, you need to renegotiate your debt payments and probably consider bringing in an investor or partner. An investor? Russell looked up sharply. I built this company from nothing. I'm not giving up control. Then you'll lose everything. Pride is a luxury you can't afford right now. We spent the next 2 hours going through options, each one requiring Russell to swallow more of his ego. By the time I finished the presentation, he looked like a man who'd just watched his entire world collapse. How long do I have to decide? He asked finally. If you want to implement these changes gradually, you needed to start 6 months ago. If you want to survive, you need to start tomorrow. Russell was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city below. Fred, can I ask you something personal? Sure. How did you build your consulting business? I mean, really build it? Because what you've shown me today, this level of analysis, this depth of understanding, you're not just some guy with a spreadsheet. I considered how to answer. The truth was that my business had grown through reputation, through delivering results that other consultants couldn't match. Word of mouth in the corporate world was everything, and I'd spent 5 years building a network of satisfied clients who recommended me to others. I focus on results, I said finally. I tell clients what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And I don't take on projects I can't deliver. What made you take on mine? I looked at him carefully. Russell Henderson, the man who had seemed so confident, so successful, so superior to me in my wife's eyes, was sitting across from me practically begging for help to save everything he'd built. You came highly recommended, I said simply. After Russell left, I sat alone in the conference room reviewing the financial projections I'd prepared. If Henderson Marketing implemented every one of my recommendations immediately and aggressively, they might survive. It would be painful, humiliating, and expensive, but possible. If they didn't, Russell would lose everything within 2 months. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison. How's your first day consulting for Russell's company? I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, educational. Russell says you seem to know what you're doing. Maybe this will be good for both of you. Good for both of us, I almost laughed. Allison had no idea that the man she'd chosen over me was about to lose everything, or that I was the only person who could save him. She was planning a future with someone whose present was built on quicksand. Another text came through. Russell wants to take me to dinner at Le Bernardin next week. He says he has something important to tell me. Le Bernardin, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Russell was planning to spend money he didn't have to celebrate news he couldn't afford to share. I wondered what he wanted to tell her. Maybe that he was going to leave his wife for her? Maybe that he was ready to make their relationship official? Or maybe he was planning to propose. I closed my laptop and gathered my papers. Tomorrow I would present Russell with his options, accept my recommendations and possibly save his company, or reject them and watch everything collapse. Either way, Allison was about to discover what her new life was really worth. But tonight, I had other work to do. The Chicago client had confirmed our meeting for next week, and the contract they were offering would pay more than Russell's entire consulting fee. My real business was thriving while I played surgeon to his dying company. It was almost poetic, really. For 23 years, Allison had been waiting for me to become the success she thought I should be. She just never realized that success looks different when you're not trying to impress someone who's already decided you're not worth their respect. The call came on Thursday morning while I was reviewing Henderson Marketing's staffing requirements. Russell's voice was tight with panic, stripped of its usual corporate confidence. Fred, I need to see you immediately. Something's happened. What kind of something? Just, can you come in, please? When I arrived at Henderson Marketing, the atmosphere felt different. Employees huddled in small groups, whispering. The receptionist who'd offered me coffee on my first day was packing her desk into a cardboard box, tears streaking her makeup. Russell's office door was closed, but I could hear raised voices inside. I knocked, and the voices stopped abruptly. Come in, Russell called. Inside, Russell sat behind his massive desk, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Across from him sat a woman in an expensive suit, her briefcase open, legal documents spread across the desk like accusations. Fred Morrison, our consultant, Russell said weakly. Fred, this is Patricia Williams from Henderson Marketing's board of directors. Patricia Williams looked at me with the kind of sharp assessment that came from years of corporate warfare. Mr. Morrison, I've heard about your recommendations. Ms. Williams. I took the empty chair, noting how Russell's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee cup. Patricia turned back to Russell. As I was saying, the board met last night. We've reviewed Mr. Morrison's preliminary assessment, and we're deeply concerned about the company's viability under current management. Russell's jaw tightened. We've already discussed implementing his recommendations. Things can be turned around. Russell, you've been drawing against the company's line of credit to pay your personal expenses, the BMW payments, the restaurant bills, even your rent. It's all been charged to company accounts. Patricia's voice was cold, factual. That's not management. That's embezzlement. My stomach dropped. I glanced at Russell, whose face had gone ashen. I was going to pay it back when things turned around. With what money? Patricia pulled out a thick folder. You've been living beyond your means for 2 years, using company funds to maintain a lifestyle the business couldn't support. The board can't ignore that. I felt like I was watching a car accident in slow motion. Russell's expensive lifestyle, the one that had impressed Allison so much, had been funded by stealing from his own company. We're prepared to offer you a choice, Patricia continued. Resign immediately with a small severance package, or face criminal charges for misappropriation of funds. Russell's composure finally cracked. Patricia, you can't do this. I built this company. I am this company. You nearly destroyed this company. She closed the folder with a sharp snap. The board has already voted. David Chen will take over as interim CEO while we implement Mr. Morrison's recommendations. David Chen? Russell's voice was barely a whisper. My assistant? Your former assistant. He has an MBA from Wharton and 5 years of operational experience. More importantly, he hasn't been stealing from the company treasury. I sat there in stunned silence, watching 20 years of Russell's career collapse in real time. The man who had seemed so successful, so confident, so superior to me in every way, was being fired for theft. How long do I have? Russell asked finally. You can clean out your office today. Security will escort you out at 5 o'clock. After Patricia left, Russell and I sat in his office surrounded by the trappings of success that had never been real. The expensive furniture, the awards, the photographs with business leaders, all of it built on borrowed money and borrowed time. How bad is this going to get? Russell asked, his voice hollow. I considered lying, offering some comfort, but he deserved the truth. Criminally, if the board doesn't press charges, you might avoid jail time. Financially, you'll probably have to declare personal bankruptcy. Everything you've bought with company money will need to be returned or paid back. The BMW? Gone. The apartment? If it's been paid for with company funds, yes. Russell put his head in his hands. Jesus Christ. What am I going to tell Allison? The question hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. I could have told him then that Allison was my wife, that this conversation was about to get infinitely more complicated. Instead, I asked, how serious are you two? Serious enough that I was planning to propose next week. Russell laughed bitterly. I had reservations at Le Bernardin, had being the operative phrase. She doesn't know about any of this. She thinks I'm successful. She thinks I'm everything her husband isn't. Russell looked up at me with eyes full of desperation. Fred, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay, based on what you've seen, what you know about the company's situation, do I have any chance of recovering from this? Any chance at all? I thought about the $75,000 consulting fee Russell had promised me, money that would now never come. I thought about Allison's texts about dinner at expensive restaurants, about her plans for a future with a man who was about to lose everything. Russell, I said carefully, recovery depends on what you're trying to recover. Your career in marketing? Possibly, but it'll take years and you'll have to start at the bottom. Your lifestyle, the cars, the restaurants, the luxury apartment, that's gone. Your relationship with Allison? That depends on what she values more, you or the lifestyle you've been providing. Russell nodded slowly, like a man accepting a terminal diagnosis. She's not going to stay. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city that had once seemed to belong to him. Allison left her husband because he couldn't provide the life she wanted. What do you think she's going to do when she finds out I can't provide it either? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Allison. Russell seems stressed lately. Everything okay with the consulting project? I stared at the message, thinking about how to respond. Russell was right. Allison wasn't going to stay. When she learned the truth about his financial situation, about the theft, about the lies, she would disappear faster than his BMW was about to be repossessed. But she didn't know yet, and I was the only person who could tell her. Fred? Russell was looking at me expectantly. What do you think I should do? I slipped my phone back into my pocket without responding to Allison's text. Tell her the truth, tonight. Don't wait for her to find out from someone else. And if she leaves, then you'll know what she really valued about your relationship. Russell gathered a few personal items from his desk. A photo of his parents, a coffee mug, a small paperweight that looked like it had sentimental value. Everything else would stay behind. I want you to know, he said as we prepared to leave his office for the last time, working with you these past few weeks. You're brilliant at what you do. Your wife is lucky to have someone with your expertise. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. Thank you, Russell. Maybe when this is all over, when I figure out what I'm doing next, I could hire you again for whatever business I end up in. I looked at him, really looked at him. Stripped of his expensive suit and corner office, Russell Henderson was just a man who'd made desperate choices and lost everything. The same man my wife had chosen over me because she thought he represented success. Let's see how things go, I said. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the conversation Russell was about to have with Allison, about how she would react when she learned that her new life was built on theft and lies, about how quickly the future she'd planned would evaporate. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Allison's number. I let it go to voicemail. But later that night, as I sat in my basement office reviewing contracts for my real business, the one that was thriving while Russell's collapsed, I listened to her message. Fred, something's wrong. Russell is acting strange. Can you call me? I think I might need to talk to someone who understands business. For the first time in 23 years of marriage, Allison needed my expertise. The question was whether I was ready to give it to her. Allison arrived at our house the next evening looking like someone who'd been hit by a truck. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smeared, her confident posture completely gone. She stood in our doorway clutching her purse like a lifeline, her eyes red from crying. Can I come in? She asked, her voice small and broken. I stepped aside without a word. She walked into our living room and collapsed onto the sofa where she'd sat just 2 weeks ago, telling me about her bright future with Russell. He told you, I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she finally looked up at me, her face was streaked with fresh tears. Did you know? When you were consulting for his company, did you know what he'd been doing? I knew the company was in trouble. I didn't know about the theft until yesterday. Theft, when she said the word like it tasted bitter. He stole money, Fred, company money, to pay for our dinners, our hotel rooms, my jewelry. I've been wearing stolen earrings. I sat down in my old armchair, the same chair where I'd learned about their affair 3 weeks ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. They fired him, she continued, her voice breaking. His assistant is taking over the company. Russell has to pay everything back or they'll press charges. The car is being repossessed tomorrow, the apartment. He can't afford the apartment. I waited. There was more coming, and I knew she needed to say it. I left him. The words came out in a rush. He asked me to stay, said we could work through this together, start over. But Fred, I can't. I can't go from the life I thought I was going to have back to nothing. So you came here. She looked around our modest living room, taking in the second-hand furniture, the walls that needed painting, the carpet that had seen better days. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I didn't know where else to go. All my things are here. My life is here. Your life is where you chose to put it 3 weeks ago. I made a mistake. Fresh tears started flowing. A terrible mistake. I thought Russell was successful, thought he could give me the life I wanted, but it was all fake, Fred. Everything was fake. I studied her face, looking for something genuine beneath the desperation. What exactly are you asking me, Allison? I'm asking if there's any chance, if we could try again. If you could forgive me. For 23 years, I would have said yes immediately. For 23 years, I would have been grateful that she wanted to come back, would have overlooked anything to keep our marriage together. But 3 weeks of living without her constant disappointment had shown me something I'd never understood before. I was happier without her. Do you know what I did while you were gone? I asked. She shook her head. I worked. Really worked. Without someone telling me every day that my efforts weren't good enough. I signed 3 new clients. I landed a contract in Chicago worth $200,000. I had dinner with Margaret Willis. You remember Margaret from Consolidated Freight? She offered to recommend me for a consulting position with her new company that would pay more in 1 year than Russell made in 2. Allison's eyes widened. $200,000? My business, the one you called my little hobby, generated $430,000 in revenue last year. After expenses, I cleared more money than Russell's legitimate salary. She stared at me in shock. Why didn't you tell me? I tried to 3 weeks ago. You were too busy explaining why I was a failure to listen. The room fell silent except for the sound of Allison's quiet crying. Outside, I could hear our neighbor's dog barking, the normal sounds of suburban life continuing around us. I can change, she said finally. I can be better. I can support your business. Be proud of what you've accomplished. Can you? I leaned forward slightly. Because 3 weeks ago, when you left me for Russell, it wasn't about money. It was about respect. You didn't respect me, Allison. You didn't respect my work, my choices, my worth as a person. Money won't fix that. But if I'd known? If you'd known what? That I was successful? That I was making money? Would that have changed how you felt about me as a person? Or just about my bank account? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. We both knew the truth. I called Russell this morning, I said quietly. He asked me to continue working with the new management to help implement the restructuring plan. They're going to survive, probably even thrive under proper leadership. He won't be part of it, but the company will recover. That's good, she said uncertainly. He also asked me to tell you something. He said he hoped you'd find what you were really looking for. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. What am I looking for, Fred? I don't even know anymore. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the yard I'd been maintaining alone for 3 weeks. The grass was greener somehow, the flower beds neater. Even the house looked better without the constant tension that had filled it for years. I think, I said carefully, you're looking for someone to make you feel successful by association, someone whose achievements you can claim as your own. But that's not how happiness works, Allison. That's not how marriage works either. So there's no chance for us? I turned back to face her. She looked so small sitting on our old sofa, so different from the confident woman who'd walked out 3 weeks ago. Part of me felt sorry for her, but pity wasn't love, and it wasn't enough to rebuild 23 years of emotional damage. I've already filed for divorce, I said gently. Her face crumpled completely. When? Last week. After I realized that for the first time in years I was sleeping peacefully. I wasn't angry anymore, wasn't hurt. I was just free. She sobbed openly now, the sound echoing through our house like a funeral dirge for our marriage. I felt sad watching her pain, but not sad about my decision. You can stay here tonight if you need to, I said. But tomorrow we need to discuss how to handle the separation practically. The house, finances, all of that. Where will I go? That's up to you. You have a job, savings, family. You'll figure it out. She looked up at me with something like wonder. You're really done, aren't you? After everything we've been through, you're just done. I'm 56 years old, Allison. I spent 23 years trying to be the man you wanted me to be. I finally figured out that the problem wasn't who I was. The problem was that you never bothered to find out. That night I slept in my basement office while Allison stayed in our old bedroom. I could hear her crying through the ceiling, but it didn't change anything. Some doors, once closed, can't be reopened. In the morning, she was gone. She'd left a note on the kitchen table. I'm staying with my sister until I figure things out. My lawyer will contact yours about the divorce. I'm sorry, Fred, for everything. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new home office in a house I'd bought with cash from my consulting business. The Chicago contract had led to 2 more major clients. Margaret Willis had indeed recommended me for a position that would let me work remotely while traveling between corporate offices across the country. My phone rang. Russell's name appeared on the screen. Fred, I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Of course. How are things? Better, actually. I got a job with a small marketing firm. Entry level, but honest work. I'm seeing a therapist trying to figure out how I got so lost. He paused. I heard about you and Allison. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was the right decision for both of us. She called me last month. Asked if I thought we could try again, now that we were both starting over. I wasn't surprised. What did you tell her? I told her I was done trying to be someone I wasn't to impress someone who didn't really know me. Russell's voice was clearer now, more honest than I'd ever heard it. I think I finally understand what you meant about telling the truth. After we hung up, I sat in my new office looking out at the mountain view I'd bought with my success. My real success, not the borrowed illusion that had destroyed Russell's life. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Willis. "Dinner tonight? There's someone I want you to meet. Fellow business owner, recently divorced, very smart. I think you'd like her." I smiled and typed back, "Sounds perfect." For the first time in 23 years, I was living my own life on my own terms. And it was exactly the life I'd always wanted. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.